Hello, welcome to this month's LCMS Youth Ministry webinar where we are talking about growing service and leadership for young adults. My name is Mark Kiesling. I'm Director of LCMS Youth Ministry, and joining us today is Julianna Shults, who is the Manager for Young Adult Corps, Lutheran Young Adult Corps, and serves in the LCMS Youth Ministry office, also working with young adults across the Synod. We're so glad to have her here today and to present about how we lift up young people in their times of service and their many vocations. As we get started on this webinar, just want to talk to you a little bit about the features that any meeting has, that if you have questions for Julianna, there is an opportunity on the lower left-hand corner of your screen to type in questions that you can have that either Julianna will answer in the middle of the presentation if it's a clarification piece, or we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So feel free to submit your questions there. And we'll also have a time at the end of the presentation in which there can be more dialogue and more opportunities to ask questions. Before we get started today, I want to start with a word of prayer and ask for God's blessings upon Julianna's presentation. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and for this gift of technology, for this time for us to come together and to talk about the blessing it is to have young adults in our lives and in our churches. Lord, we pray that you help us to find opportunities to put them into places of service in your church and in your world, that as they continue to grow in their many vocations, that they may grow in their service to you and to their neighbor, and to learn more about what it is to be your people and your love for us in Jesus Christ. Lord, I thank you for Julianna, for her service with Lutheran Young Adult Corps and the many ways in which she serves your church. Bless her this day as she presents to us and to encourage us and challenge us in connecting young adults into opportunity of service. We thank you for her and her many gifts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Welcome, Julianna.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Very excited to be joining you guys today and talking a little bit about service and leadership, particularly targeting young adults, although I think this has a lot of applications for teens and preteens as well. Just to kind of give you some context, I served for 11 years as a DCE, both in Florida and then in Chicago. And since then have taken a call. I serve here on the youth ministry staff working on a program called Lutheran Young Adult Corps. We'll talk more about that as we get to the end of the presentation. But it's really pulled me into a lot of areas, new areas for me, particularly focusing on those who are in their late teens and into their 20s who are leaving the church at kind of astonishingly large levels, and us really being concerned about what it is that we can do as a church body to help keep them connected, to help build up their faith lives. And I really see a lot of those connections happening around the topics of service and of leadership. So we're going to start the webinar today by thinking about who are we talking about? Who are these young people in their 20s? And what are some characteristics of those young people that might play into how we use them in service in the church, in service in the community, and in leadership in our church. So one of those characteristics that we're going to talk about, I'm going to turn my video off so you can see more of that, is that young adults in their 20s are what we're going to call chronically over-prepared and underutilized. So these students are some of the most educated young people in ever. They certainly have more degrees to their names than many of the generations that came before them. You can see that in their student debt hitting a record level of $1.31 trillion last year, the 18th consecutive year that the American education debt rose. So they're coming out of school highly educated. They have quite a lot of debt. And then we see this next statistic, which is that their unemployment rate is at 8.1%. Pretty significantly higher than the overall percentage of unemployment for adults in the United States. They often are struggling to find jobs, and you can see that in the stereotype that is the student who's got a master's level or a doctorate degree who is your Starbucks barista. The sort of assumption that these young people are coming out of school with degrees and are having a harder and harder time finding employment. What does that mean for us as a church? Well, we did a survey of the Young Adult Volunteers, Orange Nation, that happened at the gathering in 2016. And 91.6% of those young adult volunteers said that they feel equipped to serve in their congregation. Then one of the next questions we asked them was, do you have a leadership role in your congregation? And only 25% of those young adult volunteers reported having a leadership role. Again, we see them feeling over-prepared. Now, I think there might be a fair thing to say. Are they really over-prepared? Maybe. Maybe they just think they are, but they are certainly well-educated. They are certainly ones who are wanting to get out and use the skills and abilities that God has given them. They want to live out their vocation. They're ready to serve. They're ready to lead. And yet, congregations seem to have a void in terms of those leadership. We just recently did a set of research with congregations, asking them about their compromise from 2004 to 2006. Only 57% of those congregations indicated they had a leader that was under 32. That was very startling to me. They have this whole demographic of young people, not just young people in their 20s, but high school and junior high youth who could potentially be junior leaders in certain aspects, but that they only recognized that they had, only half of them really had leaders that were under 32. I think the next piece that we might want to recognize about this, necessarily this age group, is that, that they're looking for experience over ownership. Millennials, it may be in part due to the fact that they are they might be struggling financially because of that underemployment, because they're underutilized, are more impressed with experience than they are with ownership. Experience over ownership here. This is one of my favorite BuzzFeed articles. It talks about 20 things millennials killed. And here when they talk about killed, they're talking about really kind of common consumer industries that had been bustling and growing before millennials came into adulthood, and that now millennials had managed to sort of just cut away. So here you see the wine industry. We've ruined Applebee's. We've ruined really lots of vacation things. Millennials really are not participating in that consumer culture nearly as much as generations before. And I think part of that is that they are looking to value experiences, travel, time together, much more than they are thinking about ownership, having cars, going out to fancy restaurants, those kinds of things. So in that same way, that's going to bleed over into your church life as well. They're going to be less impressed with church membership or of programming, and more interested in your church's community and in your church's service opportunities. The example I always use is that I started tithing to my congregation before I actually even became a member. I was people in my church are often part of a small group before they become a member. They are looking for those pieces that are most important to them. And they're not that church membership isn't important or that programs aren't important, but that is not the crux of what is drawing them into the church experience, not what is keeping them coming back from week to week. And certainly we recognize this theology of that. We hope that the Holy Spirit is working in their hearts and bringing them to the altar every week. 94% of LCMS young adults polled said it was important for them to find a church that was involved in community service. That's from this recent poll that we did, the data that we're going to release later on at the beginning of next year in Symposium. This can be an interesting one for those of you hoping to use young adults when it comes to working with them with minors. Many of us have risk management policies that prevent non-members from working with minors. So this might be something that you'll kind of butt up against and have to really work through as you try and move young adults into service opportunities. I think one of the last ones we're going to talk about here is, again, achievement versus instant gratification. Millennials struggle with that expectation as they must be high achievers. These are some recent stats from Barna that 52% of millennials expect to have attained their dream job in 5 years. That seems pretty impressive to me. I guess maybe it depends on what their dream job is. But also 33% of them worry they're disappointing the people that are close to them. 49% of them worry that they're choosing the wrong career. These are young people who've grown up with high levels of expectation and achievement. And we see, again, this constant worry that they have that perhaps they might be doing the wrong thing. You also see talk about being disappointment to their families or even to their church communities. Along with this, we're seeing really high levels of anxiety that are helpful or that our young people are struggling with. They also have instant gratification as a part of that. They have answers at their fingertips. If you run across a question, they're going to have something right there to connect to answer that question. We're always using Google to try and find those things. And part of that is social media, that constant comparison to others. This is where we're going to run across this in our church world, and that traditional church processes take quite a long time. From the conception of an idea to its execution may take many months. It may take approval from boards that only meet once a month. So many times, traditional church processes do take a little bit of time, and they are used to being able to kind of go from 0 to 60 in a really short amount of time. And it also means there's many pulls on their schedule if they want to make the most of their time. Again, that has to do with achievement, but also the ability to connect and be out with friends in just a really short amount of time. We don't always schedule nearly as far out, maybe as generations before us. That gives us a little piece of this idea of who are we talking about and how might some of those characteristics of young adults hit up against where we're at the church and how we want to put those young people into service and into leadership. So why are we putting them? Ooh, that is weird. Okay. We recognize that God is always calling up young servant leaders. I took a look, did a little Google search, went through some of the young leaders that we see that God has called throughout Scripture, and there are so many of them. You think about David, who was just a teenager when he took on Goliath. This one was surprising to me, and I actually would appreciate some verification. I don't know if there's people with theological degrees who are watching this. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I saw a couple different ages for them. They were described as youth, so I'm gonna go with under 30 on that one. But they were quite young when they faced Nebuchadnezzar, the young man who offered up his lunch. I mean, we could think through all of these ways that God is calling up young servant leaders into His church to be able to serve them. We want to continue as a church, as we always have, of recognizing the importance of elders and of experienced adults in the church and the things that they bring, the history they bring, the way that they've seen God acting in their lives. And we also want to encourage them and you to continue to lift up younger leaders, bring them along, bring in your Aarons to learn from your Moses, to be able to move the church forward into what God is calling it to do next. We want to help, particularly thinking about service, and service as God designed it to create a shared experience that facilitates deep, ongoing relationships. One of the things I love is studying our brains and the way that God designed our brains. And I have one of my favorite pieces of research talks about if you eat a piece of chocolate, you and rate it as delicious, but actually people who eat chocolate with other people rated it as more delicious than if they ate it alone. There is something about the experience with people that heightens that God designed us to be in community, and when we do things in community, that increases the pleasure of that activity. Service can connect young adults with new people in your church body. Many times when I would have service opportunities, say for teenagers, I would try and utilize adults that maybe were passionate about the kind of service we were doing, but that weren't typically chaperones for other kinds of events. And the reason I would love to do that is it exposed those young people to new individuals in their church body, maybe somebody that they had never met before. But again, that we're connecting that experience to them, that it's facilitating some ongoing relationship with some new and expanded people in that church body. And community service connects the congregation as a whole to neighbors and to communities far away. So like we said earlier, these young people are looking for service opportunities that are ones that where their church is connecting to the community in some way. That for them is the fruit of the Spirit, the evidence that God is at work in that place. And so certainly we want them to be a part of how they connect their congregation to their community. Service learning creates teachable moments. Often when we're serving, we create something called cognitive dissonance. If anybody's familiar with cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable feeling you get when someone confronts you with new information or ideas or actions that contradict your current beliefs, ideas, or values. It's the uncomfortable feeling when you are faced with a fact that does not align itself well with your with what you already thought. So the first time, I'm trying to think of a good example. The first time someone explains to you that a tomato is a fruit, that is weird, and it made an uncomfortable feeling in your brain until you figured out why that was. We do that in large and small ways all of the time, but part of that is that we have three ways that we can resolve that. We can either come to understand, to accept that new idea or action or information into what we believe. We can dismiss it entirely, or we can hold those things in tension. When we give young people service opportunities, we're giving them an opportunity then to confront some new pieces of the world, maybe some new pieces of their faith, to hold those in tension, to discuss those, to talk about those, to go back to Scripture, and to help them to come out of that experience with a new and deep and a more solid faith experience. And that's why service gives an opportunity for students to help solidify faith and expand worldview. It also gives us a chance to discuss with them faith and discuss how to be a Christian in a broken world. I think service, especially service outside of your congregation and your community, gives a great chance for you to debrief and to talk about what it looks like when our faith life hits the pavement, when it hits our neighbors, when it comes to real life, and how hard it can be to be a Christian in this world. It can be very hard. We hear young adults talk about that all the time, how hard it is to be a Christian in this world. And the more chances we have to facilitate discussion around that, to facilitate experiences around that help them grow and solidify their faith, the better chance we have of retaining them in our church body. And again, it helps us teach vocation. Barna did a great study about why millennials stayed in the church. We saw a much higher proportion of millennials stay in the church when they learned to view their gifts and passions as a part of God's calling. We also saw a much higher rate of retention when millennials said, I went on a trip that helped me expand my thinking. So those opportunities to experience cognitive dissonance and address it, can really help solidify their faith teaching vocation can really help them see their gifts and passions as a part of God's calling and to live those out. And especially for millennials who are being underutilized often in the employment world when many are still living at home, and many are struggling to find jobs and not just unpaid internships. Service provides them an outlet to live out their vocation, and that's a thing that we can celebrate with them. So I don't think we have anybody here asking questions, so we're just going to keep going. I'm going to plug us through. But if there are other people who join us and have questions, let me know. So a couple of things that we're going to start here with here. What does it mean to mentor them into service? So service here is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about volunteering either within your congregation or with your congregation in the community. So the first thing we want to say here is get to know the young adults in your church. Treat them like you would any other adult who you are hoping to engage in service by kind of getting to know them, talking to them, spending time with them, asking good questions, finding out where their gifts are, finding out where their skills are at, finding out things that they feel passionate about. Often I talk about gifts of the hands, gifts of the head, gifts of the heart. So what are the things they know, what are the things they can do, and what are the things that they're passionate about? Those three things. And then be able to take those and find places or invite them to places where they can particularly use those gifts. Please do not use them as the token young adult. Hey, we should really get a young person on this board without any regard for what they're passionate about, what they know, what they're interested in. We see that often. What we need on this board is we need a young person, and then often that young person does not get utilized in any kind of meaningful way, or they really, frankly, they see that. They know that that's the intention, and then especially as they begin to serve, often will get put by the wayside and not actually have their opinions heard or used in any meaningful way. That can be really disenfranchising for them and not encouraging for them to continue to think about service. So don't really truly get to know them, find ways to use their gifts. Think about how you would put them into service. That you kind of have two ways that you can do that. So if you have some team positions or service with specific rules and goals, set them up for success. So here, just like any other volunteer, you would say, if we're adding them as a new Sunday school teacher, you're going to have them watch you do that experience once, help you once, have you help them, and then have them do it themselves with somebody watching, just so that they get a sense of what they're supposed to be doing, the patterns to those things, how they're supposed to participate in the team, expectations for them. Don't just throw them in those particular circumstances, especially if they're supposed to be interacting with other leaders or with other service people providing service or other volunteers, especially if they're working in a place or in a service opportunity that they haven't before. So if we're going out into the community to do something and you've got specific guidelines for that, make sure that you're keeping them up to speed on that. But if it's a new service opportunity, maybe this is a new exciting idea that they had, that you're connected to a new organization, they love the church to help serve that new organization, or they have an idea of how we can better connect to our neighbors, let them run, just throw them in the deep end. Let those service opportunities, give them some flexibility, let them run and try it, and give them the resources they need to be able to do that. So kind of making sure that you're navigating when you should be giving them very specific guidelines and when you should be giving them some flexibility. That can be really hard. That can be very, very difficult to know the right way to guide that. But I think think the more that you're in a relationship with them, the better that will be. Always come back and assess. Remember that young servants, young leaders especially, need that feedback loop to get completed. So when something's been done, come back, talk about how it went, what things went well, what things didn't go well, what resources or training do they still need, would they like to do it again, all of those pieces. As leaders, we want to make sure that we're coming back, we're talking about those things, we're guiding them through those things, give constructive guidance and feedback. I think one of these things that we forget is I just saw this piece of research that said that young adults would take a pay cut if that new job offered them a mentor. They really are looking for older adults, more experienced adults to walk beside them as they learn and as they grow. Let's look then at the next is we're coaching them into leadership. So hopefully as they start to serve within your congregation, as they start to serve with your congregation in the community, that they are finding opportunities to be leaders, that you're training them up to be leaders. Truly, young adults are passionate about their church. And that may be true, even if that does not have the same look or appearance as it did 50 years ago. As young adults might be very passionate about their church and their church community, but they might not instinctively know exactly how to express that. I mean, I think back to we have an older adult in my congregation in Chicago who would always talk about how her husband would just all on his own know to come every Sunday or every Saturday and weed the flower beds. And she knew that her husband was very passionate about the congregation. He wanted to see it be successful because he weeded the flower beds, and she just could not understand why the young adults in our congregation did not instinctively know that they needed to come on Saturday and weed the flower beds. That's and I had a hard time expressing to her that that's perhaps not how they're going to show that they value the church and the church community. So keeping your eyes open for evidence that they really are invested in their church. Even if it doesn't look like tithing. Again, think back. These are young people who are underemployed, who often don't have a lot of money to give. So really focusing on other ways that you can help them to engage with the church life. Be willing to set aside ego and expectation and allow young adults to lead. It can be really difficult to pass off a leadership position that you've had for a long time. The first year that we had someone different through crafts in CBS after 25 years was fairly devastating for some people. Not for the person who actually gave it up. She was really fine. But everybody else. Because they had so expected that to be her role into perpetuity. Or we have some older adults, especially who, we think about older adults who in our church would sneak in early on a Saturday morning and put up all the Christmas decorations. And they would do it the morning that they told everybody that we would set up Christmas decorations starting at 9. And so everyone would show up at 9 with their donuts, and it would all already be done because these older gentlemen did not want to have to admit that they needed help getting up on the ladders. You are 80, do not do that. Right? So we have to set aside some ego, set aside some expectation, let some young adults lead. Let them see you fail. Right? That's hard. But let them see you kind of struggle through things or talk them through the struggles that you're having. They don't hiding that from them is not going to be helpful to a new leader. Letting them in on the discussion, letting them see how you walk through those things, those struggles, the failures, really is beneficial to them. Set an example of confession and absolution. When you mess up, ask for forgiveness and receive absolution, and be sure to do that as publicly as necessary. If I make a mistake and do something wrong in vacation Bible school, I may need to make that confession in front of all the volunteers. Maybe I don't. Maybe it's something small that I need to do with a specific adult. But certainly we want to make sure that we are modeling that for young leaders. Millennials are going to ask a lot of questions about the process. This is not because they like process. They actually don't usually like process very much. They're not tend to be process people, but they're going to ask a lot of questions because, one, they're trying to figure out the hard work that you've done to get to this point. So they're going to ask a lot of questions about behind the scenes, because the assumption is that you've already figured out a lot of things that I don't have to figure out on my own. Don't be afraid to answer those questions. Don't turn them down. Don't dismiss those questions because you think that they aren't important. Help them see how you got to where you are today. And also because they truly believe, and this is really true, that everything can be improved. They're going to ask a lot of questions about how you got to where you are, so that they can see what the next step is. And that can be really helpful for a board, for a committee, for inside of your church as you raise up young leaders. Let them ask the questions so that you have to articulate the process so that they can figure out what the next step is for your congregation. Be sure to evaluate with them. Again, comes back to that cycle of inviting them to help, to encouraging them to lead, then coming back and evaluating with them what went well so that they can be able to be coached through that. And be sure to have their back. Anybody who's been in church leadership knows that there's always people out there who are going to be critical of the things that are going on. But be sure and have their back as you invite them into leadership, so that they know that they have a safe place in which to try new things. The abundance of counselors is one of my favorite proverbs, where there is no guidance people feel, but an abundance of counselors, there is victory. So bring people on board, try some new things. The abundance of counselors always is helpful. And then once you've, nope. What? There. Okay. Let go of the reins. So you brought them into leadership. You've coached them and you've tried them, then let them go. New generations are going to do something differently. Millennials are not into meetings. No one is into meetings. Why do we have so many meetings? It's totally unnecessary. Technology can help facilitate a lot of service and leadership. They might not be willing to sit in a once-a-month meeting where the agenda is exactly the same as it was last month. We have all sat in that meeting. But they're going to answer texts. They're going to answer emails, use technology, Facebook groups, Dropbox, all the things that you need to be able to facilitate service and leadership with this next generation. Embrace that, and it will save you time. It will save you so much time. Might be a little hard on the front end as you learn new things, but it is well worth that investment. Be prepared for ministry to become more relational and less programmatic. That's going to look weird to eyes maybe of 40 or 50 years ago, maybe even less than that, where we measured success by the number of programs and the numbers in those programs. That was the only way that we measured success in terms of ministry. That is not necessarily the way that young leaders are going to think. They're going to think more in terms of relational development than they are about programs. So millennials are seeking that connection and that community. They're less excited necessarily about institutional programming. So walk with them as we learn how that looks in a church, and value those things just as much as we value programs. So it might mean that an older program changes a little bit in order to include some more relational time, or that it adjusts in a way that looks less structured, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not being successful. And again, don't let go of the reins and then take them back. That's it goes kind of back to when you make the young adult just because they're a young adult. Don't lift them up into service and leadership and then decide that you don't like what you're seeing and take it back. Mentor and coach through it. Serve through that. Be a servant to those young adults as you teach them to be servants to others in the congregation. We're going to talk a little bit about, that is not, what is happening here? There we go. That's the stuff. Talk a little bit about Lutheran Young Adult Course. It's going to be a little bit of a change up. So do we have any questions about that before I kind of go into the more advertisement part of that? Mark, did you have any questions? Okay. I think we just have Matt here. He doesn't have any questions. So we'll just go ahead and go into the not advertisement part. This is how it looks for us. This looks how it looks for me. The Lutheran Young Adult Corps provides long-term, full-time service opportunities for young adults 18 to 26 in underserved communities. Right now we have 2 terms. They're 10 weeks and 10 months. 10 weeks works in the summer, so they start kind of the last week of May and go through that first or second week of August, depending on their placements, or 10 months through a school year. So they would start at the beginning of August here in St. Louis, and they would go all the way through the end of May. They do get vacation time. We have 12 young adults who are serving right now, 4 in Boston, 4 in St. Louis, 2 in New Orleans, and 2 in Baton Rouge. They are all very excited that they're going to take kind of their first significant break here for Thanksgiving. They've been working hard since August. They serve full-time, so they serve with churches, they serve with recognized service organizations, they serve with community organizations. We provide their housing and a stipend as they go ahead and as they serve in those ways. And our focus is on faith development, their faith development and the faith development of the people that they serve. Service in Jesus' name and embracing Christ-centered community. Really embracing that in their homes so they live together in community, and then the community that God has placed them in those underserved communities where they serve full time. So a couple of places. So anyone can participate. They are 18 to 26. They're high school graduates, and they are LCMS members. Those are the only major requirements. We primarily, for the 10-month program, are looking for students who are in some kind of transition. So they could be coming out of high school. They could be with some college or some work experience, or they could be coming out of college. All participants are given a church community where they're going to be supported and where they're going to worship. They're also going to get that full-time service placement in a church, RSO, or community organization. We are taking applications for this next program year right now. So if you would go to lcms.org/YACORPS, YA-CORE, you can look through more information about that. You can find out more information about what it would mean to be a part of that and take a look at that application. Or you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, Lutheran YA-CORE. The placements are for about 40 hours a week of service. It's based on their skills, so we get to know them a little bit. We find out about their what they want, and then we work with community partners. That's what we call our churches, our campus ministries, our RSOs. Find out what they need, the kind of position that they're looking for. We do a matching system where we put those two things together. And we're hoping that those churches, those campus ministries, RSOs are able to extend their ministry, particularly into the community. So what are those young people doing now? That's the most often the most asked question that we get. And the truth is, every single one of them has a different thing that they're doing. So we have some that are working in campus ministries in Boston. We have quite a few that do some after-school program work. We have one that's working with immigrants and refugees here in the St. Louis area. We have another one who's working with food distribution and other work with homeless people out of a church here in St. Louis. We have people working at both Camp Restore and Camp Restore Baton Rouge, both working with servant groups that come down to serve, and then also working with the partners that they have down there to provide some extra volunteer time. So lots and lots of different ways that they could be utilized. And we'll take really any skills. So we had somebody come to us this year with an English degree, and certainly they were just really, we really benefited from them, and certainly they're being used in many ways to be able to write some grants and do some community or some newsletter work and all sorts of other things. So we use just about any kind of skill set that we can use. And then there's plenty of other ways that young adults can get into service, or your high school or junior high students can get into service opportunities. LCMS servant events. We have about 80 offered in 20 districts in 2017. The servant events include kind of that training for current and prospective leaders, personal Bible study, group building, devotions, connections, other Christian youth. Again, you go to lcms.org/youth and find out there's so many of those. There's plenty around. They are typically fairly inexpensive, but great ways to especially take your high school and junior high youth to serve. And then also engaging maybe some young adults as leaders as you go ahead and do that. And then encouraging young adults who might be in the right age range, 19 to 25, to serve as young adult volunteers for the gathering. That application will be open next summer. Yes? Okay. That's a great way. We had 600 young adults serve at the last gathering. Just an amazing group of young people who serve and encourage one another, who are able to benefit the gathering in many and various ways. So I'll have some time for questions, but I don't know if we have any.
Have you heard of any other ideas? So obviously Young Adult Corps being a great one for young adults to get involved in service, maybe even talking about the 10-week program in the summer.
Yeah.
What are some other areas, how could a congregation help, like say college students on summer breaks, get them connected into meaningful service? What are other opportunities out there, especially maybe especially they want to keep them at home, in their home church where there maybe isn't Young Adult Corps.
Right, or NOLOMA. I can put in my plug-in for NOLOMA.
Yeah, maybe
Camp's application's now open for NOLOMA.
Absolutely, great ways to serve. Some that might be closer to home, too. Have you heard of any other stories where churches or organizations have helped facilitate that piece when they're really looking for opportunities to serve, like internship programs? Have you heard of congregations who have done that?
Yeah, there are certainly some congregations that are capable. Most of those are going to be around other church workers. So bringing back a TCE student, bringing back a pastoral student who's going to serve in those ways. But think about, the opportunities that you have that are specific to the summer. So Vacation Bible School springs to mind. And you can get them involved in that. I mean, thinking about now, what young adults are coming back for Thanksgiving and Christmas that I need to tap into to put that on their calendar for this summer. Or your summer sermon event, if you're taking young adults to a sermon event, being sure to include them in that. I have seen quite a few churches that will instigate some kind of specific young adult ministry that will happen primarily in the summer. So they don't have a group that's typically around during the school year because everyone's gone away to college, but they know they have a decent group of, 6 to 8 that are interested, preparing some of those things, to make sure that they have service opportunities, that they have opportunities for Bible study together, those kinds of things. I would love to hear if there are other ways people are deliberately doing that just in the summer. But I definitely think that there are ways that are unique in the summer. So you're going to give your Sunday school teachers a break in the summer, but you want to keep programming going. You want your youth leaders to take a break in the summer, engaging them in those ways. any of those places where you think, hey, for a short time we can utilize that person. Even going so far as to say, like, hey, if they're serving in high school as an usher, make sure that you're asking them to do that when they come back from college, that they're sure continuing to ask those things. I know when I worked a part-time job in high school, when I came back for breaks, I was able to come back. Hopefully the church will function much like that. If you're serving in one way in high school, when you come back, the expectation is that you're helping that way as well.
Cool. Thank you so much, Julianna, for this presentation, and certainly encouragement for us to connect with young adults who are in our congregation and young people, and it maybe help plan out some ways in which you're already working with your teenagers and how you connect them to opportunities to serve through LCMS servant events or other mission trips and service opportunities, young adult corps, young adult volunteers at the gathering, and other ways too in which your church can encourage them of their life of vocational service. Thank you so much to all of those of you who have joined us today or are watching this on demand. We thank you for the ways in which you connect young people to Jesus Christ and to encourage them in their walk with Him. God bless your service. Take care.